Welcome back to another episode of the Big D podcast on the Spunky Spectrum Sports Network. I am back, I would say, for my weekly contribution with NFL season, full in the middle of off season. It's been a little less than that, but it's always a pleasure to jump back on with the Big D himself, Dylan Schmittler. And we've got a great episode today going through some wheeling and dealing leading up to the NFL draft. But before we get into that, do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, do not forget to like and subscribe. Follow the channel. Dylan's always pushing out great content. He's streaming on Twitch. He's streaming on YouTube. He's posting YouTube videos. He's always got great content on any sport you can imagine. No matter what streaming service you're using to watch this on, definitely make sure you're following him and keeping up to date with his updated content. But to bring in the man himself, the biggest Jacksonville Jaguars fan I know, who's probably ready to make another trip to London because it seems like the Jaguars always go to London, Mr. Big D Dylan himself. How are you, sir? Welcome to your show.
Hey, thanks, Alice. And by the way, you mentioned London. Oh, wait a minute. What happened the last time the Dolphins and Jags played in the UK?
Urban Meyer got one of his only highlights of his NFL coaching career, but don't remind me.
Hey, you went 2-0 against Tua and Josh Allen. Not even Tom Brady went 2-0 against those guys.
That's true. Hey, the Dolphins are still undefeated with Tua Tagovailoa as their quarterback against the Patriots, so I can't be too upset about it.
You played Mac freaking Jones, for heaven's sake.
Hey, it was still Bill Belichick coach football team. He terrorized us for years, so I can't be too upset. But we have a great episode today. As I mentioned, we are talking wheeling and dealing. We've got the NFL draft coming up next week, and there's always some good draft day trades and moves across the league. This is really, I feel like, one of the first times that the teams really start moving when it comes to making trades. And, obviously free agency is kind of coming past, but we're starting to inch a little closer and closer to the NFL season towards, I think, off-season, non-required training and workouts are starting up, and teams are starting to get back to players are starting to get back to the facilities. And it just means we're getting closer and closer to August and September for the start of football season for the 2024 year. But we've got some great content today, and I guess to kick it off, first subject coming up, I want to know, Dylan, there's been some great ones in the past, and I'm sure you've got a catalog of memories, but when it comes to your favorite draft day trade, what's the number one thing that comes to mind?
Well, I think of a couple in particular, but one, how about the San Francisco 49ers getting Jerry Rice in 1985? San Francisco, of course, won the Super Bowl in 1984. Sorry, they beat Dan Marino Dolphins. I feel like I'm dissing the Dolphins this episode.
A little bit, Dylan. A little bit. We're 3 minutes in. You've already had a couple hits on them. It's all right. I forgive you.
But of course, San Francisco at the 28th spot as Super Bowl champs, and then Bill Walsh engineered a trade with the Patriots to move up a dozen spots. San Francisco was at 16 because the Niners really wanted a wide receiver. And there were three wide receivers in that 85 draft. There were Altoon from Wisconsin, Eddie Brown from Miami, and a wide receiver you might have heard of from Mississippi Valley State named Jerry Rice. And Altoon was the first one, I think, by the Jets. Then Bengals took Eddie Brown at 13. The 49ers at 16 drafted Jerry Rice. I don't know about you, but I think Jerry Rice is still catching touchdowns somewhere at Hard Rock Stadium in the Super Bowl against the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be one of the biggest steals in NFL history. I mean, you don't typically get the number one position, the number one all-time player at a position, in a draft day trade. So I think, as you mentioned, the San Francisco 49ers were onto something when it came to the wheeling and dealing that they were pulling quite some time ago. But it's hard to argue with you with that pick there, Dylan. I mean, it's Jerry Rice. That's all you got to say. Obviously, he brought the city of San Francisco some Super Bowls and made a legendary career out of playing football in the Bay Area.
And by the way, that Super Bowl performance came against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah. Yep. What goes around comes around. Everything. It seems like everything in the NFL comes full circle at one point or another.
Yeah, and the Bengals were probably thinking, "Oh no, which one would have drafted Jared Rice?"
And honestly, it's a franchise who's not, opposed or not opposed, but a franchise who's pretty accustomed to having legendary receivers. I mean, obviously we know TJ. I mean, TJ Houshmandzadeh was great as well, but Chad Ochocinco is obviously where I was going there. I know T.O. had a little bit of a stint playing in Cincinnati. I mean, we've seen AJ Green, in a little bit more recent history as well. I mean, Cincinnati Bengals know a thing or two about some great receivers, but not quite that great, unfortunately.
You're forgetting You're forgetting Mr. Collinsworth back in the day.
Yeah, of course, Mr. Chris Collinsworth. But you're definitely right about that. Thanks for checking me there. But
Yeah,
I think
my Gator friends would have chomped on me.
yeah, no, it's a good say. I mean, especially being in the Sunshine State myself, I'm disappointed myself for skipping out on him. But no disrespect, Mr. Collinsworth. You had a great career and are a legend when it comes to Cincinnati receivers. But I don't know if I don't know. Chris Collinsworth or Ocho Cinco? Who do you have there when it comes to Cincy wide receivers?
I'll take Chris Collinsworth with the mic.
Mm. I mean, Chris Collinsworth is great in the studio, but man, Ocho Cinco is something special. I think he's got the quickest feet in NFL history.
Quickest feet, that might be quickest feet. Jerry Rice. Nobody could cover Jerry Rice. Not even Dion, for heaven's sake.
Oh man, Ocho ran some nasty routes. He comes from that soccer background. It's all about those quick feet. But I mean, both were amazing in their own regard. But when it comes to when I think of draft day trades, it's not too often that you see a trade that really benefits both parties. And I'm bringing it back to a specific anniversary actually of this year, taking it back 20 years ago. I mean, like I said, you don't typically see a draft day trades that really seem to work out for both teams, but that's pretty much exactly what happened in the case of Eli Manning and Philip Rivers. Obviously, I think everyone knows the situation there. We're not wanting to get drafted by a specific team, Eli, and not wanting to go to not San Diego at the time and play for the Chargers. And I remember seeing the documentary on the draft there, and it's just crazy to kind of see how they really took a leap of faith on hoping that the other owners and GMs would stay true to their word and taking the guy they didn't even really want because they had a feeling that the deal was going to get done. And of course, obviously Eli Manning went on to win 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. Philip Rivers had a great career with the Chargers, and I just think it's pretty memorable. I mean, it's not too often you see players refusing to play for a team, and again, not too often you see trades working out for both parties. It always seems like it ends up upsided one way or another. So being that it's the 20th anniversary of that draft, and obviously it was one of the biggest storylines out of that draft, I definitely think that's one of the most memorable ones for me for sure.
And by the way, how about not just Eli Manning or Phil Rivers, but Big Ben Roethlisberger going to London from Miami of Ohio?
Yep. I know. I mean, there's so many moving parts in that draft, so many pieces. No one knew who was taking what quarterback. No one knew who was at the top of everyone else's list. Yeah, and the only thing everyone knew was that Eli Manning didn't want to play for the Chargers. That's pretty much the only thing that was made clear by the time that draft came around.
And it's funny, the GM of the Giants, Ernie Corsi, was the GM of the Baltimore Colts, and in 1983, he drafted John Elway, who didn't want to play for the Baltimore Colts. Yes, Baltimore Colts back in the day. And then the Colts and Broncos owners made one of the most infamous trades in NFL history. Elway goes to Denver, and the Colts get an offensive lineman, a first-round pick, and a backup quarterback.
Yeah, it's no, I mean it just kind of rings true. I mean, you never know what's going to happen on draft day. I mean, you think you might know, and we see all these experts who have their mocks, and obviously the majority of them are taking account that teams are going to stay still, and it never ends up being that way. There's always going to be a team who makes a move that you're not necessarily expecting, and I know we're talking about favorite draft day trades, but I do have to throw in some dishonorable mention to my least favorite draft day trade, because just thinking back to the 2013 NFL draft and what Miami did to trade up to the number 3 pick, I will never forget being so excited. Of course, you want your team to draft high. You want your team to take one of the best players available in the whole draft. And when Roger Goodell announced that the Miami Dolphins are on the clock with the number 3 pick and have selected defensive end out of Oregon, Deion Jordan, it just seemed to it really just seemed to check off every box as a Miami Dolphins fan that we've seen and heard for pretty much my entire life. It was not the guy Dolphins fans expected, and to make matters worse, the player who went directly behind Deion Jordan, a position that the Miami Dolphins have been struggling to fill for 20 plus odd years, Lane Johnson for the Philadelphia Eagles. And to make matters worse, I just want to name off a couple other decent football players who went after the Deion Jordan pick. Barkevius Mingo at 6 to the Browns isn't too terrible. Sheldon Richardson, a defensive lineman in his own regard, goes to the Jets at pick 13. And the number one name that really stands out to me, you got to go back a little bit, but in the 63rd overall pick of that 2013 draft, obviously he wasn't projected to be a top 3 pick, but the Kansas City Chiefs select Travis Kelce. So definitely a bit of sickening memories for me. And just when we talk about draft day trades, it's what really stands out to me when it comes to some of the misery that sometimes the draft day will bring to fan bases everywhere.
Don't remind me of that draft. I'm trying to get over the Jags drafting Luke Joker number 2 from Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of I think it was pretty widely recognized as not the greatest draft ever. I mean, you see Tavon Austin in the top 10 there, but you got some decent names. I mean, Ezekiel Ansah to the Lions, Sheldon Richardson, Eric Reed went pick 18 to the Niners, Kyle Long to the Bears, Xavier Rhodes, DeAndre Hopkins 27 to the Texans. I mean, there was definitely some hits in the draft. Unfortunately, Miami wasn't one of them.
Yeah, neither was my team.
But I think we've definitely talked over the past and some highlights, some lowlights when it comes to previous NFL drafts, and especially when it comes to draft day trades. But I want to jump into the present. Obviously, we're coming up to draft day here, and everyone has a mock draft. Everyone thinks they know what's going to happen, but no one really knows what these GMs are thinking and who wants to make a move. And I'm really curious, Dylan. Who do you think is going to make a splash? I want to hear what team is most likely in your opinion to make a jump into the top 10 picks?
The Minnesota. I feel very strongly the Minnesota Vikings will move not just in the top 10, but in the top 5. Minnesota already made one move, acquiring a second first-round pick from Houston, that being 23. With 11 and 23. I don't think Houston's getting one of. I don't think Minnesota's getting one of the big 4 quarterbacks. The Vikings need a Kirk Cousins replacement. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, and one of the best young offensive minds of football. Guess what? If the Vikings get their quarterback, it would be like a rookie ended up in a penthouse.
Yeah, it's it. I mean. I love the choice of words there, but you have a great point. I mean, obviously with Kirk Cousins moving on to Atlanta, I mean, there's definitely a hole there. And, in that division with those rivalries and that level of competitiveness, you're not going to survive without someone under center who you can really trust. And obviously we've seen in recent history, we've seen some rookie quarterbacks who have not performed as well. But, I mean, just looking at C.J. Stroud last year, I think it's safe to say that franchises are starting to learn that you can trust a rookie quarterback to come in and start taking the field from day one. And I think Minnesota, I have to agree with you. I think that's got to be the first thing on their minds.
And plus, you look at that division, Detroit Game 6 is all the Niners could win on Championship Sunday. Green Bay darn near beat the Niners in the division round. And Chicago's going to draft Caleb Williams unless the Bears are who we thought they were, and that's why we took the bleeping field.
Yeah. Which, knowing the Bears, you can never really doubt them to make quite a head scratching move. So you never know. The jury's still out there, but have to think it's safe to assume.
I think the Bears are going to draft Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
By the way, trivia question. The Bears have how many 4,000-yard passes in franchise history?
4,000-yard passers in franchise history. Chicago Bears, huh? 2?
0.
0. I was thinking Jim McMahon back in the day. I was thinking, I don't know. They're obviously not a franchise we know when it comes that we think of when we think of superstar Hall of Fame quarterbacks. But I figured someone might have done it.
Nope, nobody.
Well, that's crazy. Well, I'm sure Bears fans are definitely rooting for Caleb Williams to be the first. But yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, you might not like Chicago's pizza.
That's a good point. But kind of keeping in the same light. Obviously, I know Minnesota. You think Minnesota definitely could be making a move into the top 10, maybe even in the top 5, looking for a quarterback. I'm curious, is there any other teams that you could see who could really be making a jump to try and get in better draft positions to get the next franchise quarterback?
Two AFC West rivals, one being the Broncos, one being the Raiders. I think the Raiders more so at 13 because I don't know about you, but Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew aren't winning any division titles. I think the Raiders have to appease Devontae Adams. They can't go through another season with suboptimal quarterback play. Aiden O'Connell threw for what, 50, 60 yards on Christmas Day against the Chiefs. He's not winning the division title. And yes, I love Gardner Minshew. I love that mustache. But he's not a guy you want starting for 17 games. If Gardner Minshew starts for 17 games, and by the way, only play him when he's Shane Steichen's his head coach. I don't trust him with Antonio Pierce. I think the Raiders have to get one of these quarterbacks, and particularly Michael Penix. Al Davis used to love somebody who could throw the ball deep down the field. Well, guess who's got the best arm in this draft? Michael Penix.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Broncos, again, Sean Payton fixed that offensive line 1 year. Now he's got to fix the quarterback position. I think Bo Nix makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying he's Drew Brees 2.0, but he's got a lot of Drew Brees qualities in him.
Yeah. And it's funny enough. Obviously, we talked about Justin Fields a little bit. We talked about Russell Wilson leaving Denver now, both obviously not playing in Pittsburgh for the Steelers. And, I totally agree. I think, it's both of those teams are, first of all, you think about the division, and you're going against Patrick Mahomes twice a year. You need a quarterback under center to be able to compete with that. If you don't have a quarterback, at least who is average at best, ideally, obviously, a good quarterback, you don't stand a chance in that division, let alone, you're facing Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes twice a year. You have to have a quarterback to compete in the NFL. Everyone knows that. And, especially when you've got Patrick Mahomes coming to town every single year that you can count on, you got to have a quarterback. And those are two teams who obviously are desperate for one. And it's, I think it makes sense. I like the logic there. And, it's a division that, we were potentially calling the AFC best before the offseason last year. And all of a sudden, the Kansas City Chiefs, we say the Bears are who we thought they were. The Chiefs are definitely who we thought they were. And it doesn't look like they're going to be going away anytime soon. So, the rival teams in the West, they've got to do what they can to fill in some patches. Unfortunately for them, those patches are in the quarterback spot. But, it's not a bad draft to be able to make some moves and try and make it happen.
And if you want a sneaky team that could move in the top 10, the Indianapolis Colts, because I think the Colts need to get another pass catcher. Yeah, we know Anthony Richards got a lot of potential. Don Taylor's still great tailback. Michael Pittman won people a lot of money last year with his consistency. But the Chargers need another weapon. Somebody who can either get down the field or in the middle of the field, whether it be a Brock Bowers, a Malik Neighbors, or Roma Tuesday, the Colts. And I'm not just saying it because they're in my team's division. I think the Colts could very well make a move up the draft.
Yeah.
Which is very on Chris Ballard-like.
Yeah, you're right. But, they definitely have some pieces. Obviously, I know you mentioned, Anthony Richardson there. Michael Pittman is obviously the star over there. Jonathan Taylor inked up the deal. So they've got the pieces. And, I think even Alec Pierce, he's definitely he had a good year last year. I think he's definitely a reliable piece that they can count on. But in today's NFL, it's a passing game. And you look at some of these teams who are 2, 3, 4 wide receivers deep on guys who could potentially even be starting on other teams. And you need some pass catchers who can move the chains. You need some guys who can help out, especially when you've got a young quarterback there in Indianapolis. And, it's interesting because obviously it's such a wide receiver heavy draft. You kind of think, why not stay and just take who's available when you get to the pick because there's so many options, or even, take another need in the first round. And, there's at least going to be a guy, I'm sure, who's going to be on their board, in the second or third round. But, it's when there's depth at a position in a draft, obviously, where do you want to be at the top of that depth? And really the best way to make sure that happens is to move up and get the guy you want. So if there's a guy on Chris Ballard's board, and there's a guy that the Indianapolis Colts want to catch passes from Anthony Richardson, you got to help your young quarterback out and do what it takes to bring him in. But let's see. We've talked about past draft day trades. We've talked about moving into the top 10. We've talked about teams that can make a move for a quarterback. I'm curious, Dylan, how about a team who's been in the league? We've talked about players who are coming into the league. I'm curious, what player do you think could be most likely to be moved from their current team on draft day?
I've got 2 veteran wide receivers who both played in recent Super Bowls.
Okay.
I mean, we've already seen Steph Diggs go from Buffalo to Houston, which I think may have surprised a few of us.
Yeah.
I've got to think one of T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk will be gone next, and maybe more so Ayuk, because San Francisco 49ers are not going to put up with all this, yep. Yeah. I mean, the Niners have got arguably probably the best running back since Barry Sanders and Christian McCaffrey. Hall of Fame tight end George Kittle. I'm not sure what you call Deebo Samuel, but that guy's like half wide receiver, half running back, half fullback, half strong back.
Yeah.
And Brock Purdy basically making $15 an hour minimum wage. But I don't know if the Niners can pay Brandon Ayuk $20-25 million a year. I mean, we just saw Devontae Smith get $25 million from the Eagles. Boy,
Yep.
Philadelphia's paying everyone.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and that was, and you hit on the point I was going to make. But the biggest thing about that team is they've got so many pieces. They've got so many guys who are going to want their money.
Oh yeah, Nick Bosa just got a monster deal.
Yeah, I mean, that some pieces are going to have to move. It's impossible in the salary cap era to keep that many big pieces on your roster, and that upper management knows that Brock Purdy is making the least amount of money that a drafted NFL player could possibly make. Obviously, being Mr. Irrelevant, you're going to have to pay him. He's taking you to he's taking you to NFC Championship games. It's all about the future, and it's an interesting piece because I see time and time again people talking about the San Francisco wide receivers, and who's the real number one? Is it Brandon Ayuk? Is it Deebo Samuel? And it just makes more sense in my opinion, and it looks like in your opinion as well, to have Ayuk as the guy who goes. I think you can get a good haul for him. I mean, I think you're potentially looking at maybe. I mean, I don't know exactly what the buying price would be for him. It really just depends on how desperate a team is for a wide receiver and the price that they're willing to pay. But, whether it's a this year pick or a next year pick, I could see, very easily, a third round, fourth round pick maybe for Ayuk. I mean, that might be pushing it a little bit, but you're gonna get decent value for him. You can get his money off of the books and really focus on the core that you've built in San Francisco. You mentioned Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, Nick Bosa just got paid, and Brock Purdy's paycheck's coming right around the corner. So you got to make a move eventually, and it seems like a decent one to make at the time.
Especially this being a wide receiver draft.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not saying this will happen on draft day, but I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Ayuk ends up in Western New York. Because I don't know about you, but the Buffalo Bills sure look like they need a wide receiver. Because Jacob Davis went to Woman Passers, and Steph Diggs is now doing the Texas two-step in Houston.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you've got to think they have a plan. I mean, it's Josh Allen's football team for crying out loud, but it's definitely some head-scratching moves out of Buffalo. I mean, obviously, you want to set your team up for the future, and you want to be able to pay the guys who you find worth paying and make sure that you're, set up and able to control your assets. But you're in Josh Allen's prime right now. I mean, it's just – I understand Stephon Diggs wasn't happy. I mean, we've known Stephon Diggs hasn't been happy for about a season and a half, recently in Buffalo. So that move makes sense. I mean, Gabe Davis is a good receiver. I've got some partial to him because of his Central Florida roots going to UCF. But he's not a superstar. He's not going to be a wide receiver one anywhere unless it's going to a team with a really bad wide receiver core, similar to I think Gabe Davis would be the one in San Diego and Los Angeles Powder Blue right about now, and he would be the number one in Buffalo right now if they held on to him. But
by the way, do you know who's whose team? Do you know where Gabe Davis will be playing this year?
I just had a brain fart.
What?
How am I gonna forget where Gabe Davis got drafted or traded?
You don't know who signed Gabe Davis.
It was the Jaguars.
How did you not know that?
I knew it, Dylan. It slipped my mind. I've been busy lately. That's my fault.
You could just see the towel.
I know. I don't know what happened there. I'm a little rusty. I haven't been on the show in a while, and I've been very into it's been NBA playoff season, Dylan. Cut me some slack.
You've been watching too many Jimmy Butler NCL highlights the past 24 hours.
I've been watching Jimmy Butler grabbing his knee on the court in the past 24 hours, but that's a story for another day.
I mean, you imagine Brandon Ayuk catching passes from Josh Allen? I
mean, they need someone. At the end of the day, you've got Dawson Knox, you've got Dalton Kincaid, and then you've got
Khalil Shakir,
yeah. I mean, like it's for being one of the best, for having one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, pretty much in his prime. You're not really giving him a lot to work with. I mean, even the run game. I mean, it's not like they have a superstar running back that they can rely on. I mean, the defense is pretty solid, but they lost a lot of pieces on defense this offseason as well. I mean, I'll tell you what. I'm nervous if I'm a Bills fan. And I obviously have some bias there as a Dolphins fan, but you just look at what the roster went through. Obviously, you still have Josh Allen, and you're going to continue to have Josh Allen, and he's going to win you a couple football games on his own. But you got to have some pieces. You've got to be a well-rounded team, and there's not a running back on that team who I could say I love. I think they're serviceable. I think they're talented. Do I love them? No. There's not a receiver in the game. Their two tight ends are great, but it's just a lot of weird moves for a team who really seems to be in Super Bowl or bust mode right now.
I'll say this: Kansas City traded Tyreek Hill and won back-to-back Super Bowls.
Yeah, I get that, but Tyreek Hill also wasn't necessarily disgruntled in Kansas City. I think that was more of a financial move than anything else, and they knew they could get strong assets for him. I mean,
Wait a minute, that sounds like what happened. That sounds like what happened with Steph Diggs, though.
they didn't get anything for Stephon Diggs.
Second round pick.
I mean, yeah, but they also gave up 2 additional picks in addition to that. I mean, second round it wasn't. I could be wrong about this. Wasn't the second round pick for next year, or was it for this year?
Yes, next year.
It's I just you've got Josh Allen in his prime. Like I know Stephon Diggs wasn't happy, but it just seems it's head scratching to me. There hasn't been enough addition. There's been a lot of subtraction and not enough addition, in my opinion, for the Buffalo Bills to seem like they're acting like they're trying to be competitive. I mean, if it wasn't for the Miami Dolphins absolutely throwing the division away in December this year, they wouldn't. I mean, there was a chance the Buffalo Bills shouldn't have even made the playoffs this most recent year, and now you're cutting half your roster. It's just a lot of question marks to me. Josh Allen didn't look perfect last season. We saw a lot of games where he had some struggles. I mean, his interceptions were highly concerning. If I'm looking at it from an outside perspective, it's just we're going to be talking division previews in the next upcoming weeks leading up to preseason here. But I see a lot more question marks than I see answers when it comes out of Buffalo. But this could all be changed after next week. They could be making some big moves and bringing in some real talent. They better hope so, because at this point, I could try out for receiver in Buffalo.
Well, the Bills are still going to win the AFC East next year.
Maybe. Who knows? I'll tell you what, the Jets won't. I promise you that.
You sure?
Promise. Guarantee it. Guarantee it.
So then, if the New York Jets win the AFC East for the first time in forever, what are you going to do for punishment?
Whatever you want. Name your price. I will put anything on the line that the New York Jets do not win this division this year. There's a good chance it'll be Buffalo just because of Josh Allen. I think there's a good chance it's going to be Miami just because I think we're the most talented roster in the AFC. Obviously, the New England Patriots are going to be in the cellar, but I didn't trust Aaron Rodgers going into last season, and now he's coming off an Achilles injury. I know it was the fastest Achilles return we've ever seen, but the Jets do what the Jets do, and I think we all know what the Jets do, and that's lose.
I've got a perfect idea, punishment idea of the Jets win the division this year, but I won't mention it here. Trying to keep everything PG rated.
There you go. I mean, we can talk off camera about that, but I will definitely stand on that.
Okay, what's your next question for me?
Yeah, I guess let me see. Let's jump into a bit of rapid fire. I'm curious, just because we're kind of sticking on the wheeling and dealing trend and talking about draft day trades, I'm going to name off some teams, and I'm curious, Dylan, you can give me a little bit of insight on top of it if you'd like, but I'm just going to name some random teams, and you tell me if you think that they're going to stay in their draft spot or if they're going to move from their draft spot. Give me 1 second. Let me bring up, actually, just to make this even more professional, just to make sure I've got my ducks in a row.
I'm gonna need Jake Glazer to help you get your ducks in a row.
We're gonna start with the Las Vegas Raiders picking at number 13 overall. Are the Raiders staying or are they moving?
I think ultimately the Raiders move up the draft, but it depends on what happens. If 4 quarterbacks go in the top 5, could the Raiders move up maybe ahead of Denver? Maybe 9 at Chicago. One of these teams moves back and wants a defensive player. I think the Raiders will look to get a quarterback, whether it's at 13 or high.
Gotcha. Perfect. I know we kind of talked about that a little bit, but just wanted to start there. And kind of keeping it in the division and keeping it right around the same part. You just mentioned them, the Denver Broncos at 12. What do you see them doing?
I see Denver staying at 12. I think Denver ultimately stays at 12. I could see Denver going forward or going back, but I think Denver stays at 12. Whether it's for a quarterback or not, we'll find out in the next 7 days.
Gotcha. I think one of the most curious teams we've seen, I think mainly because of a pretty big article that just came through, I think ESPN within the last 24, 48 hours. New England Patriots, according to reports, everything's for sale when it comes to New England. And that includes the number 3 draft pick in this year's NFL draft. Do you see the Patriots selecting a top 3 player in the draft this season, or do you see them coming back?
Ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised because if you look at New England's history, the Patriots have moved back quite a bit. I mean, it seems like Bill Belichick would always love draft picks. Now, of course, he's not drafted in New England, which seems like a strange occurrence with some of his draft picks. But I mean, could the Patriots draft a wide receiver? Could the Patriots move back and get a wide receiver at 5, 6? Could the Patriots maybe take a quarterback at 3, or maybe move back, move forward, maybe move back at 11? Ultimately, I think the Patriots end up moving back, but nothing would surprise me.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, there's a lot of holes in the Patriots team, and they got a lot of needs. I think, according to the reports that came out today, it really seems like they want as many assets as possible, and it seems like from what we're seeing, just based on reports, trading out of 3 will give them the opportunity to improve their team more. But there's some names that are sitting around that top 5, top 3, top 7 projected draft picks that it'd be mighty hard to pass up. I mean, I'm looking at Marvin Harrison Jr.'s. Obviously, the quarterback situation isn't very stable in New England. I mean, do they just bite the bullet and take a quarterback and try and find someone a little bit better than Mac Jones from the 2021 draft? But it's going to be an interesting decision there for sure. There's a lot of ammo. There's a lot of return that they can get from the number 3 pick, obviously, especially in a quarterback-heavy draft, a wide receiver-heavy draft. There's a lot of options for them, and definitely going to be interesting to see what they do on draft day. But I guess let's go to – I'm curious what you think the New York Giants are going to do at pick 6.
I think the Giants are going to stay exactly where they are.
Yeah.
I don't think the Giants move up for a quarterback. New York is not going to move back for a wide receiver. I think the Giants stay and draft a wide receiver because I don't know about you, but New York might have one of the worst rosters in the league. Who's New York's number 1 receiver now? Jalen Hyatt?
I don't even know. Maybe, sure.
I mean, who's New York's number 1 running back going to be now that Saquon's wearing green? Devin Singletary?
Yeah, that was their big offseason move, I think. Yeah. They made a couple moves, but
at least it beats Dallas's move.
Yeah. Funny enough, speaking of Dallas, what is where's Dallas picking? 24. What do you think the Cowboys are targeting this year, or thinking at least in that spot?
I think Jerry Jones is drafting an offensive lineman.
I mean, they're known for their offensive line, obviously. I mean, they've hit some really nice pieces. Obviously, Leo Collins just made the move to Cincinnati recently, but you got to protect your offense. Dallas's offense is pretty powerful, but you got to give Dak time. You got to give CeeDee Lamb time, and it's going to be. I'm not mad at that pick there.
By the way, I don't know about you, but why are the Cowboys waiting so long to pay CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and old Michael Parsons? Like, is Jerry Jones going to cost himself like $800 million in contracts?
Yeah. It's always tough, Dylan. I mean, when it comes to the salary cap and making sure that your people are getting paid, you're always going to have to lose people you don't want to lose. You're always going to have to pay people more than what you want to pay him just because of what the market's calling for. And it's all about timing. I mean, when it comes to these guys who are bringing in deals, whether it's a quarterback, whether it's a receiver, whether it's some of these D linemen, I mean, you just got to play the market game. And obviously, waiting can be dangerous because players can sign contracts, and that kind of sets the tone for what other players in that same tier are going to be looking for pay wise. But it also gives you a chance to see the market and see what other options might potentially be out there. Should the Cowboys lock up CeeDee Lamb? Of course they should. So should the Cowboys keep Dak Prescott? I find it highly unlikely to find someone better. I don't think Dak Prescott's perfect. I think he's good enough for the Cowboys to do what they need to do. But it's a tricky game when it comes to giving these contracts, especially on rosters who are pretty stacked and who have significant pieces who need to get paid. I mean, you got to count your pennies, and you got to make sure that, the guys who truly deserve every one of those cents and every one of those millions of dollars are the guys you're giving it to. And whether you want to play the market game and kind of wait around and play chicken and try and see, if you can talk them down, or, it's an interesting concept, but it's something Jerry Jones is going to have to figure out, because he's got some big players who are going to be looking for some contracts very shortly.
Yeah, and seemingly the Cowboys have always paid guys maybe a little more than they should. Ezekiel Elliott.
Mm-hmm. What is he doing now? A mediocre year with the Patriots. He's a free agent, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
He might end up back in Big D.
It wouldn't be a bad move. If I'm Dallas, I'd bring him in.
And then he's like
jumping in the Salvation Army bucket.
Yes.
But I think really where I want to go here, Dylan, is I'm curious. I'm sure obviously you've got some opinion here. The number 17 pick in the draft this year. What do you think's going to happen with that number 17 pick in Duval?
I hope the Jags draft a cornerback, for heaven's sake, because I don't know about you, but I was about to strap on the spikes and go run and go stop Nico Collins all by my lonesome.
Yeah. Cornerback, that's where you think your biggest need is? That's what you want them to go with?
1,000%. And there are two guys in particular. I want Quinion Mitchell, the corner from Toledo, or Tyrion Arnold, the cornerback from Alabama.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, obviously you guys have, had some very strong cornerbacks in the past. A certain Jalen Ramsey comes to mind, who I'm very appreciative of is on my current roster at the moment. But, you got some weapons, obviously, on the offensive side of the ball. And, you're close. I think you guys are close. I think you've got, a piece or two, maybe a couple pieces away from really making some moves and really, it's comes down to Trevor, I think, and comes down to the defense to keep them in ball games, because you've got enough weapons on offense to win football games. But, you just can't have those games run away from you.
And be honest, Tyson Campbell's a great young corner, wasn't really healthy. I don't know about you, but the Texans look really good with Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Steph Diggs. The Colts will probably get another pass catcher. And Titans have got DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and who's the other guy? Trayvon Burks. So Jacksonville needs all the defensive backs it can find.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong about that.
And for your Dolphins, I hope you get an offensive lineman. Otherwise, Tua's going to end up on his butt more often this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, as a Miami Dolphins fan, looking for an offensive lineman in the draft is something that I pretty much deal with on a year-to-year basis. I've seen so many mock drafts having us get Jackson Powers-Johnson out of Oregon, the center.
By the way, he won't be a first-round pick. At least that's what I'm hearing.
And that's kind of what I'm hearing too. It kind of seems like Dolphins fans are higher on him than the rest of the league is. At the end of the day, a draft grade is a draft grade. Mel Kiper and his crew know so much, but they're always going to miss on picks. They're never going to know, who the next great player is. I mean, offensive lineman is obviously a need for Miami. It's been a need for the last 25 years. I think an interior defensive lineman is definitely high on the list as well. Obviously, losing Christian Wilkins. We brought back Zach Steeler, made a couple moves when it comes to the edge position, and receiver. It's kind of weird when you think that we have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, that receiver could be a need for Miami, but there really hasn't been a guy who has fallen into that number 3 slot that we can really trust. I mean, we saw the likes of Chase Claypool playing last season. Braxton Berrios, who was much more serviceable as a return man, than he was as the third receiver. Trent Sherfield was playing in Buffalo last season. He was nice 2 years ago, but, we obviously let him go. River Craycraft we brought back on a 1-year deal, but he's not the guy to be the number 3 weapon in that offense. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of names who have been floating around. I mean, obviously, I think I'd love Roma Dunze, but
he's not going to be there.
He's not falling to 21. Obviously, I'd love Brock Bowers, even at the tight end. Even after bringing in Jonathan Smith, he's not going to be there at 21. I'm really fine with Miami taking best player available as long as it's not a quarterback. I don't think this is the year. I think Chris Greer has made it very clear that the Miami Dolphins are not targeting a quarterback who is the guy. But, I would be totally fine with an interior, anyone in the trenches, offensive line, interior, defensive line, wide receiver. I think we could probably be safe enough in some of the later rounds. We don't have a litany of draft picks this season, but we've got enough to steal a receiver at some point in the draft. But definitely seems like a trench guy is probably going to be the move.
Maybe trade him back because, I mean, you look at it, Miami doesn't have, a 3rd or 4th round pick?
Yeah. It's an option. It's definitely it seems like Chris Greer has been more on the aggressive side of things in his draft history. It's either typically staying put or moving forward. We don't typically trade out of our 1st round pick just based on his draft experience, but it's not a bad idea to pick up a couple extra picks. I mean, especially if the top couple names on Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer's names go, it's definitely something I'm sure they're considering. It's something I'm sure that they'd be taking offers on, but really just depends on where the cards fall and, who the top guys on their list are available. And I wouldn't be mad at a trade back. I wouldn't be mad at getting like a round 3 or round 4 pick, maybe a couple extra picks for something, but just don't want anyone in the secondary. Don't give me a cornerback. That's it. That's really my only wish is don't give me a cornerback. Don't give me a running back. But anyone in the trenches and even a linebacker. We made some moves at linebacker this offseason. I wouldn't even be too mad if we picked up another one. Maybe not in the 1st round, but yeah.
Let me tell you this. There won't be a running. No Kuiper won't have to say, a running back in the 1st round this year. There won't be any.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
And if there is a running back in the 1st round, I owe you $25.
Well, if the Jets win the AFC East, I might owe you a lot more than that.
Oh, we didn't make that happen.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Well, I can't believe only 1 week away from the NFL draft. I mean, it seems like the Chicago Bears have been on the clock the last 3.5 months. And officially, they'll be on the clock next week in Detroit.
Yeah. It's coming around. We've been through free agency. Next step is the draft. And next thing you know, we're going to be in preseason. It's the worst part of the year. It's the longest time of the year, the NFL offseason. But we're finally getting to some of the fun stuff and really starting to see some of these rosters come together. And I'm excited to see not only what your Jaguars do, what my Dolphins do, but what teams do around the league.
Yeah, and hopefully by the time we play in the regular season, heck, we don't even know when we play. We know where we play. We don't know when. It could be week 1. It could be week 15.
Yep. Yeah, schedule release. That's definitely another big milestone when it comes to wait until August and September.
All right. So thanks for hopping on. Hopefully, you don't fall asleep during a draft night next week.
Yeah, I mean, with these work hours I've been putting in lately, Dylan, there's a good bet. I don't know. I'll take the over under on it, but I always appreciate you having me on, Dylan. It's been a pleasure as always, and it's up.